वो आजकल दिन भर वेब मीटिंग चलती रहती है उसके। हाँ
अच्छा, कौन सी कंपनी की है ये?
अमेजोन से।
हाँ अच्छा
लेकिन क्या
एजीएम नोटिस नहीं भेजना।
अरे सुनो, इस गिलास में बदबू है। मतलब कपड़े को साफ या नए कपड़े से नहीं नहीं साफ कर सकते हो, है बदबू आ रही है इसमें। बताना जो भी साफ करता है, कितना वेस्ट करते हो सब चीजों।
Hello, good evening, everybody. We'll be starting off with the session in some time now. Thank you for your patience.
और क्या करें।
चले भैया, ठीक है।
कल आ जाइए।
कल अपने भैया हमारे काम करता
जी क्या है?
चिकन की
सर नमस्कार सर।
हाँ बल्दी सर नमस्कार।
सर नमस्कार। मनीष भैया नमस्ते।
नमस्ते सर।
मीनाक्षी मैम ने
नमस्कार सर। हाँ नमस्कार सर, नमस्कार थोड़ा सा नमस्कार। नमस्कार। शैलेंद्र जी नमस्कार, हैदराबाद से। शैलेंद्र जी नमस्कार, आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही शैलेंद्र जी।
शैलेंद्र जी म्यूट कर रखा है।
अच्छा
नहीं अनम्यूट है सर।
वो सब उदयपुर के रहने वाले उदयपुर में भी आकर म्यूट करेंगे अपने आप को तो कैसे काम चलेगा।
चालू पर वो सर वो एडवांस चलते हैं। उन्होंने एक दिन पहले ही आपका पूरा फोटो बायोडा सब मिल गया मेरे को शैलेंद्र जी से।
कल इनका मेरे पास आया था। कल इनका मेरे पास आया था तो
ये किसी के 2 डिवाइस खुले हुए हैं। शैलेंद्र जी आपके शायद 2 डिवाइस खुले हुए हैं।
हाँ मेरा ही।
हाँ तो इसलिए वो इको कर रही है आवाज ना।
Good evening, sir.
गुड इवनिंग।
Chandu Bhaiya, shall we start with the session? We have 39 participants as yet. कि रुके थोड़ी देर?
नहीं स्टार्ट करो एक बार, सब ऐड हो जाएंगे धीरे धीरे।
सर आप 2 मिनट करना, मैं अभी कहीं से चल के आ रहा हूँ, चाय पीऊंगा सर मैं।
सर बिल्कुल
वीडियो सर मैं अपना है।
नहीं सर अभी टाइम लगेगा 2 मिनट। आप तो सर बिल्कुल।
हाँ प्लीज।
मीनाक्षी
Good evening, everybody. We'll be starting off with the session in 5 minutes from now. By the time I have a request to make everybody who's joined in the session, CP credit के लिए बहुत जरूरी है कि आप अपना नाम, full name state करें. So kindly rename yourself and please ensure that your full name is being displayed on the screen. Like I can see a number of names here, Manish without any surname. And then I can see Ravi without any surname. So it's very important for you to restate your name, rename yourself, so that we can it can help us in marking the CP attendance. Thank you so much.
Hey.
Yes, I'm ready. You can start in case you.
बना लिया।
Hi, good evening, everybody. I, CA Meenakshi Barwani, welcome you to today's session. We have our learned speaker and the session chairman amongst us. So I think we can begin with this session. So as discussed earlier, the session will be on deeming provisions under Income Tax Act. And for the same, I would like to request CA Manish Bamsa to please come forward for his opening remarks. For the welcome speech, apologies.
You have to unmute yourself.
Sir, you have to unmute. I have.
Thank you, Meenakshi ma'am. Virtual CP meeting series, and we are continuing. Udaipur branch is continuing these series of since last week. And today we have with us our learned speaker, CA Rakesh Gupta sir, along with the session chairman, CA Nirmal Kunawat sir. I welcome you all on behalf of Udaipur branch of CIRC of ICAI. I welcome you on behalf of CP Baldi sir, the chairman of the Udaipur branch, Ashish Ostwal sir, the vice chairman, Meenakshi Bharwani ma'am, the secretary, along with all the managing committee members and all the members of Udaipur branch of ICAI. We would love to hear you, sir, today with lots of queries today, and we welcome you in this virtual CP session. And we would love to get a whole lot of knowledge for the topic deeming provisions under Income Tax Act. So over to you, Meenakshi ma'am.
Thank you so much, Manisha. So as discussed, as Manish rightly informed us that we have the learned speaker and the session chairman amongst us. We have the speaker of the session today is going to be CA Rakesh Gupta sir. The introduction will be shared later, but for now, I would request our session chairman, who's amongst us, CA Nirmal Kumar Kunawat ji, Dr. Nirmal Kumar Kunawat ji, to please come forward for the opening remarks.
Thank you, Meenakshi. At the outset, let me congratulate the Udaipur branch and dynamic chairman, Mr. Baldi, Secretary Meenakshi, and team for selecting the relevant and complex topic, deeming provisions under Income Tax Act, and also for inviting a very learned speaker, Dr. Rakesh Gupta, to justify the subject. The main role of professionals practicing in the field of direct tax is of interpretation of law. The professional brethren should know how to interpret and tackle the deeming provisions. We, the professional colleagues, would be highly enlightened and benefited by the discussion on the subject by the very eminent speaker. Tax should be charged always on the real income, but to curb the malpractices, to collect revenue and plug loopholes, the tax administration takes the route of deeming provisions. However, for all such administration, the department already have tools of survey, search, and seizure. The lot many of sections and provisions in the Income Tax Act are legal fiction and not based on the concept of real income. To name some few, deemed dividend under section 222E, section 9, section 11(1)(a), 11(2), section 50C, 48, 49, section 56(2)(7), section 147, section 171, 292(b), 45(1), 145A, 69C, 155, 115JB, 72A, etc. There are a lot many cases of the apex court and other authorities on the subject. The deeming provisions have always raised litigation, complexities, and doubts. Also, the taxpayers have been wondering how and why one has to pay tax on the income not earned, received, or receivable. During last 30 years, emphasis of tax administration is to simplify compliance, but with due regards, remain constrained to the forms named Saral. On the other hand, with every so-called simplification and with the insertion of every deeming provision, the law became more and more complex. With these words, I hand over the proceedings to the MOC. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. We're indeed blessed and honored to have such a learned speaker amongst us. So I would start reading his introduction. The profile, I was just going through the profile, is very interesting. Sir has lots and lots of experience, and I'm sure we have a lot to take back from this session today. Dr. Rakesh Gupta ji is an FCA, FCS, AICWA, MBA, LLB, LLM, PhD advocate. He had done his graduation from St. John's College, Agra. As I already mentioned, that he is a multiple degree holder and he scored first rank in university in LLB. He was appointed as the member in Income Tax Appellate Tribunal at the age of 37, posted at Hyderabad, but he resigned later on. So he co-authored many books, partner with Dr. Raj K. Agarwal, 2 books published by leading publishers, Taxman. He's been practicing as an advocate and appearing in Income Tax Appellate Tribunal, High Courts and Supreme Courts of India. He's participated in United Nations Committee of Experts on International Cooperation in Taxation Matters. He's a member of International Association of Tax Judges and participated in the meetings held at Helsinki, Finland in October 2017, Cambridge, UK in September 2019. He was invited to address Chamber of Commerce and Industry and Finance Bill in Abu Dhabi and Bahrain. Indeed, we are really honored to have you, sir, as a session speaker. Over to you, sir. Dr. Rakesh Gupta, sir.
Thank you, MOC, for having introduced me. I mean, with that prefix that his introduction is very interesting. Thank you. Chairman of my session, and Dr. Nirmal. Chairman of Udaipur branch, Mr. Baldi. Other office bearers, my friends from Udaipur, and not only of Udaipur, but then I could see Mr. Hemant Arora from Roorkee, from Rupinder Agrawal from Noida, and my other friends from other parts of the country. Shailendra ji from Hyderabad. I have had occasion to be with him in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh Taxation Bar Associations a couple of days back. So friends, the topic, the deeming provisions. It is not deeming income or the deemed income, it is deeming provisions. And therefore, the scope of today's deliberations is much more than the deemed incomes. But in any case, since we are talking of the deeming fictions under the Income Tax Act, so in one way or the other, all deeming fictions lead to be having any impact or some impact on the deemed incomes. I will come to the deemed incomes because unless we happen to discuss, and therefore, but then prior to that, some amount of dimensions of the deemed provisions. Would you please mute everybody else's mic other than that of mine, madam? Because any disturbance.
Yes, sir, certainly.
Yes.
Certainly, actually, new members of once again.
Yes.
Yes.
So our Income Tax Act is full of deemed provisions. The deeming fictions have held or hold the field day. You just ask and it is there at the drop of the hat. And as the name suggests, the deemed provisions or the deeming fictions, that suggests that the facts are not as they are presumed to be. That is what the impact and import of the deeming fictions. Now, have you ever pondered over, have you ever thought over as to the directions in which the deeming fictions as provided under our Income Tax Act operate? Now, I will first of all quickly, traverse through the various facets of the deeming fictions, and then obviously I will come to the deemed incomes also. Now, the deemed or the deeming provisions of the deeming fictions under the Income Tax Act are as to the very taxability of certain receipts, and but for such fictions or deemed provisions would not have been treated as income even. as the dividend. I mean, though the expression deemed is not there in section 2 clause 22 subclause small e, because that is the definition of dividend, though it has been defined in an inclusive manner. But since we are discussing about certain receipts, and which cannot be said even in the farthest term of the word income as income, and yet the legislature defines it to be the income. And therefore, in that context and backdrop, I mean, we are constant to say that this dividend is nothing but the deemed dividend. So deemed dividend, any payment of any loan or advance by a closely held company to a shareholder having more than 10% voting rights, to the extent of the accumulated profit of this lending company, or the loan or advance to such concern in which the shareholder has got the substantial interest, to the extent of the accumulated profits of the lending company. Now that is what the dividend is. So if you see on the plain reading of section 2 clause 22 subclause e, now it goes to the extent of deeming even the loan or advance as the dividend. Now this is the height of deeming fiction. But then the sovereign, as I always say, now by virtue of the sovereign powers which is vested, and when condoned by the constitutional courts, when it is called in questions before the constitutional courts on the touchstone of the constitutional parameters, and then we don't have any option, we'll have to bow down. And section 2 clause 22 small e, I remember when in 1922 act this was there under section or in the form of section 2 clause 6 capital A subclause small e. I mean, when it's called in question before the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court upheld its constitutional validity. 56 to 10. 56. Certain types of receipts which but for such deeming, I mean, could not have constituted or would not have been called even an income. But section 56 subsection 2 clause 10 now speaks of the receipt without any considerations exceeding a particular threshold, I mean, which is not very significant, or the receipt of an immovable property either without considerations or for an inadequate consideration, or the receipt of a movable property either without considerations or for inadequate considerations in excess of certain basic threshold, now constitutes income. Provident fund and the ESI contributions deducted from the workman's wages by the employee. Now it is treated as income under section 2 clause 24 subclause Roman 10. And this is that clause which has caused furore in the country because of the adjustments, because of the disalliances made by Central Processing Unit Bangalore in most of the intimations sent by them, wherever there was even a single day's delay, because the provision has been worded like this. And despite your Rajasthan High Court's decision, I mean, against which the special petition has been dismissed by the Supreme Court, still the department is on the spree of making such kind of disalliances, adjustments through CPC Bangalore. That is a different matter, that those persons like me and you who are neck deep into litigations are bound to be prosperous because of such kind of disalliances which are being made. But then on the deeming fictions and the magnitude, extent and the nature of the deeming fictions, that the moment I deduct as an employer out of the workman's wages any provident fund and or the ESI contributions, the act says, the section says, even the definition of the word income under the Income Tax Act itself says that it will constitute income. Again, this is another classical example of the height of the deeming fiction. Now something now which I collected in order to help the welfare state so as to enable that welfare state to discharge its welfare functions, and me acting as a conduit, because whenever I collect it, I will collect it for and on behalf of the welfare state. I will pass it on to the welfare state, but then even a single day's delay, maybe because of any latch or negligence, because of either commission or omission. Now the section, the plain reading of the section says that it will not be allowed as a deduction. This is the height. Then 115 JB, that in case the taxable income is lesser than, or the tax on the taxable income is lesser than 18.5% of the book profit, then that book profit will be deemed to be the total income. So this is that deemed fiction. This is the deeming fiction as to the taxability of certain things which is not even the income or much less the taxable income, and yet is deemed to be the income. Then section 68 to 69D, where any sum is found credited in the books and you do not offer any explanation as to its nature and source, or the explanation offered by you, I mean in the opinion of the assessing officer, is not to his satisfaction, then such amount, I mean, is deemed to be the income of that previous year in which that sum comes to be recorded in the books of account. That is what the import of section 68. Similarly, section 69, 69A, 69B, 69C, 69D, I will extensively deal with these sections a little while thenceforward when I will proceed. Capital subsidy. Now again, the definition of the word income has been amended to incorporate even the capital subsidy, whether by way of grant. Now that will constitute income. That is what the definition of income has been enlarged. So this is the first category of the deemed provisions, now to which I wanted to draw everybody's attentions to it. Then the deemed provisions or the deeming fictions are as to the place of accrual of income. The income may not accrue or arise at a particular place, but then section 9 says that irrespective where that income apparently, ostensibly on the face of it may appear to be accruing and arising, but then we will deem it to accrue or arise in India. And that is what section 9 says, that any income on account of the business connection or an account of the transfer of a capital asset which is situated in India. I mean, under section 9, there are whole lots of situations where income on the face of it cannot be said to or accrue or arise in India, but because of this deeming fiction, now that income now is deemed to accrue or arise in India, and that is how the incidence of tax, I mean, is levied accordingly. Then there is a fiction as to the very accrual of something, I mean, which is not there. Like under section 23, subsection 1, small a, annual letting value of a vacant property. The rental value which that property would fetch in uncontrolled conditions is the benchmark or the barometer or the touchstone on the basis of which that fair rental, I mean, would get taxed under section 23(1). That income may not be there at all, and yet the deeming fiction says no, it will be taxed. Another instance is section 45 subsection 2. When you convert your capital asset into stock in trade, there is no transfer, but then definition of transfer under section 2 clause 47 defines it as a transfer. And then it further says that the fair market value as on the date of conversion will be deemed to be the full value of considerations. You have not received anything, but then the deeming fiction is to this extent that this transfer or this conversion is transfer, and not only that, deeming fiction stops at this stage. It says fair market value on the date of conversion will be the full value of considerations. Like section 45 subsection 3, as a partner you introduce your capital asset as capital contribution into a firm, then it is a transfer, and the value which is recorded in the books of that firm, that will be deemed to be the full value of consideration. I mean, you may not have got anything, but then because of the fiction which is there under section 45 subsection 3, now you will be deemed to have transferred your capital asset for that much of considerations. 45(4), that in case there is a distribution of a capital asset on dissolution of the firm or otherwise, then the fair market, it will be treated as transfer, number one. Number two, that the fair market value as on the date of distribution of that asset shall be deemed to be the full value of considerations flowing. So this is fiction as to the accrual of income which is not there. Fiction as to the receipt of income. You may not have received, yet the law says no, we will deem it that you have received under section 198. The tax deducted will be deemed to be the income received by you. Somebody else has deducted tax. He may or may not have deposited to the central government, but then the amount deducted by him, that will be deemed to have been received by me. Section 7 of the Income Tax Act any accretions to the recognized provident fund or the contribution, I mean, that will be deemed to be received by me. The fiction does not stop at this stage. Fiction goes further. The fictions as to the recipient of income. A person may not have received the income, but then the law says, no, you have received the income. The deemed dividend, the loan or advance may have been received by a concern. Even the shareholder may not have received this loan, but then the deeming fiction says, no, it will be deemed to be received by the shareholder because it is a dividend, and dividend can be said to be received only by the shareholder. 41(1). Now, if there was any deductions on account of any expenditure for which the deduction was allowed and claimed, and allowed, and later on you happen to have received any benefit, or that liability may have ceased to exist or may have been remitted by the creditor, then it is deemed to be the income. But then in case if you are the successor of a business, then also it will be deemed as if that income has been received by you. 176 subsection 3, any receipt of income after the discontinuance of the profession or business now will be taxable in the hands of the recipient. Then fiction as to the factum of transfer of property. There may not be actual transfer, but then the law says that we will deem this situation to be transferred or to be leading to the transfer. 45(2), as I said, in 45(2), when you convert your capital asset into stock in trade, now it is only change of hand from one hand to another. In transfer, normally there has to be more than one person. Here there is no more than one person. You convert. You are converting. That asset is converted as a stock in trade in your own hand. But then the fiction says, the deeming provision says, no, it will be deemed to be transferred. 45(4), when a partner receives any property on the dissolution of the partnership firm, it is not considered as a transfer. But then section 45 subsection 4 says, no, we will treat it as transfer. Fiction as to the sale consideration. You may not have got anything out of sale, but then the fiction, the deemed provision say, I do not know how many of you have seen these colors, these texture, these tones and tenors of the deemed provisions. I will come to the deemed income, but then first of all, I just wanted to feed some intellectual, kind of a stuff to my friends from Udaipur. Fiction as to the sale consideration. There may not be sale consideration, but then the fiction says, no, it will constitute sale consideration. So like section 50C, you may have transferred some land or building. You may not have received even a single penny, or may have received some consideration. That consideration is less than the stamp duty value. Then there is a fiction that you will be deemed to have received equal to the stamp duty value as full value of consideration. 43CA, if you as a real estate developer holding the land or building as the trading asset may have transferred that land or building for a consideration which is less than the stamp duty value. And then section 43CA deems that the difference or the stamp duty value shall be deemed to be the full value of considerations received or accruing. 50CA, if you have transferred some unquoted shares of a company for a price which is less than the fair market value, and the fair market value as given under section 11 UA, then the fiction, the deemed provisions say that that much of amount of fair market value as is to be computed under rule 11 UA, that the direction, the extent of the deeming fictions under the Income Tax Act. And I do not know how many of you have seen this concept of deemed income from that perspective, from that angle. The cost of acquisition, fiction. There may not be the actual cost of acquisition, but then section 49. Now it says that the cost to the previous owner will be deemed to be your cost of acquisition. That is what section 49, the deeming fiction. Then the deeming fiction as to the quantum of income. There may not be that much of income which has resulted to you, but then deeming provisions of section 44 AD says that you are deemed to have earned to the extent of 8%. or under section 44 ADA to the extent of 50% of your professional receipts, or under section 44 AE to the extent of that income which is there under subsection 2 or section 44 AE, depending upon whether is a heavy goods carriages or goods carriages other than the heavy goods carriages. So the quantum of income, even quantum of income now, I mean, is deemed fiction as to the allowability of deductions. That if you have returned your income under section 44 AD, then subsection 2 of section 44 AD says that all deductions as given under section 30 to 38 now will be deemed to have been claimed and allowed. Similarly, under section 44 ADA, all deductions given as under section 32 to 44, 32 to 38, that will be deemed to be claimed and allowed. The depreciation will be deemed to have been claimed by you and has been allowed. That is what the import of 44 AD subsection 2, 44 ADA subsection 2 and 44 AE subsection 3. Now kindly see the deemed fiction as to the year of chargeability of income. It is not only the deeming fictions as to the quantum of income. Now you see the various facets of the deemed provision. Fiction as to the year of chargeability of income. Section 8 of the Income Tax Act says that interim dividend, when it is paid to you, that will be the year of chargeability. Any other dividend, whenever it is paid, distributed or declared, that will be the year in which it will be chargeable. Under section 41 subsection 1, the year in which the remission has been granted by the creditor or the liability has ceased to exist, that will be the year of taxability of that income. 176 subsection 3, your business or profession may have been discontinued long back. You may not be carrying on that business or profession anymore, but the year in which you happen to receive any amount from the discontinued business or profession, that will be the year of chargeability of income. 48(3)(a), that in case you have been allowed a deduction in respect of an expenditure claimed by you on mercantile system of an accounting, but in the following year or years, now you have made payment exceeding rupees 10,000 to a person in aggregate in a day in violation of section 40A subsection 3, then section 40A subsection 3 capital A says that will be deemed to be the income from business or profession in the year in which the payment in contravention of section 40A(3) is made. Section 32 subsection 2, there may be unabsorbed depreciation of earlier years, but then it will be deemed to be the depreciation of the current year. So, I mean, it doesn't stop here. The deemed provisions, the nature of the capital gain, whether it will be a short-term capital gain or whether it is a long-term capital gain. Now we have got section 50, that in case there was a depreciable asset on which the depreciation was claimed and allowed, and that asset being forming part of the block of assets, now the consideration now falls short of the WDO, that block of assets, then section 50 says that the loss arising on the extinguishment that block of assets shall be deemed to be the loss arising on the transfer of a short-term capital asset, even if those capital assets in that block may have been held by you for more than 36 months, but then because of the fiction, the nature of this capital gain which would result to you now will be treated as or will be deemed to be a loss arising from the transfer of a short-term capital asset. Fiction as to the default, but does not stop here. Fiction as to the default. If you remember, under explanation 1 to erstwhile section 270(11)(c), when in respect of any facts which were material to the computation of total income, either you do not offer an explanation, or even if you offer an explanation but then you are not able to substantiate it and your explanation is not found to be bona fide, then the fiction is, the deeming provision is that you will be deemed to have furnished or you will be deemed to have concealed the particulars of income. Explanation 5 to section 270(11)(c), that in case the search has taken place and after the date of search you happen to file your return of income, then you will be deemed to have concealed the particulars of income and furnish the accurate particulars of income. Though all of us know that the return of income is the earliest point of time when the income can be declared, but then there is a fiction, the deeming provisions which has been made into the system, which has been made into the statute, that too in the penalty provisions. Explanation 5 to section 271(1)(c). Then fiction as to the assessee in default, that if you have not deducted the tax at source, or having deducted, then you have failed to pay to the government treasury. Then section 201 says that you will be deemed to be an assessee in default. So the fiction is not only in respect of the income, but then fiction here is in respect of you being designated or crowned as an assessee in default. The fiction is as to the nature of business, that if you are a company, the part of the business of yours consists in the purchase and sale of shares. Then even if, I mean, those shares were purchased by taking delivery, may have been sold by giving the delivery, but then the fiction, the deeming provisions, which is there under explanation to section 73, what does it say? It says that to the extent of the purchase and sale of shares, that company will be deemed to be carrying on speculation business. Now, you see, the buck does not stop. Therefore, as a chartered accountant, we should not visualize the provisions of the deeming provisions or provisions relating to the deeming provisions only with respect to the income. Though that is a different matter, that all these deeming fictions now have got some direct or indirect link or connection with ultimate income, because after all, we are reading the Income Tax Act. Now everything goes to the destination, ultimate destination is the taxability of income. Like my friend Mr. K. M. Roy from Calcutta, a very brilliant chartered accountant. Now every time he points out something to me. Now he said, Rakesh ji, under section 92 capital A, now there is a deeming provision and as many as 12 provisions under section 92 capital A subsection 2, which says that prices will be deemed to be an associated enterprise with each other if these conditions are there. So deeming and then this deeming doesn't stop here. Then there are deeming fictions as to the presumptions under section 292C. Now my chairman, Dr. Nirmal would vouch, under section 292C. Now there is a presumption. The moment any books of accounts or the documents, money, bullion, jewelry, valuable article or thing is found during the course of search or survey, then the fiction is that these things belong to the person from whose possession and control these are found. Then next deeming fiction is that the contents of these books of accounts or documents are true and correct. Under section 292BB, that in case you participate in assessment, in case you extend cooperation in inquiry, then you cannot be heard saying, because it will be deemed, the section says that it will be deemed that the notice has been served in time on you in proper manner, and thereafter then you will be precluded from raising these issues. So friends, the topic which has been kept by Baldi Sahab was not only confined or was not in respect to the deemed income. This is very unfair. This is very unfair. Very unfair. This is very unfair. It's very unfair. I mean, from a chartered accountant brother who is listening it. At least we must be responsible. It distracts me. I mean, that very thought process. I communicate with God. I'm communicating with all of you. I communicate with God. I mean, that is the kind of the piousness with which I speak. I do not speak from here. I speak from here. Therefore, must see as to how meditations is not disturbed. Anyway, the next. So, having spoken on these intellectual aspects as to the deeming fictions, now I can keep on speaking about the very nitty-gritties and the nuances which are hidden in all these provisions. But then I know that I am speaking, before the illustrious professional friends of a very, seasoned category. Therefore, I will straightway go to, I mean, those deemed incomes which are understood by all of us, and I mean, which are of practical use to many of us, and more particularly after the demonetizations. And therefore, I'll straightway go to section 68, 69, A, B, C, D, and then 115 B, B, E. And then on the aspect that if at all, I mean, somebody is made to surrender, then the surrender, I mean, though is made based upon the facts which are obtaining on the site, but then if given the choice as to how the surrender, I mean, if the choice is given to you, how to be made so that the incidence of tax, I mean, may not be, I mean, that much, I mean, which are usually there. So I will start with section 68, though I know section 68 is a section which we all had been studying. I mean, right from the day when we took upon the task of being into the profession. Therefore, it may not be fair on my part if I speak on the very prima facie nitty-gritties, and but then I will raise certain issues, I mean, with which we may be aware. I'm not saying that we may not be aware, but then yes, section 68. Now, section 68 to 69D. Now, these sections have always stirred our mind. But then, from the year from which section 115 was enacted, that is from assessment 2013-14, whereby incomes under these sections have been made the headless. I mean, these sections have assumed a lot of importance. These sections have assumed all the more importance after the stepped up tax rate with effect from 1/4/2017 having been brought by the Taxation Laws Second Amendment Act 2016. Section 68, any sum found credited. The moment there is any sum which is found credited, then to explain the nature and source of such credit, the initial onus rests on the shoulders of the person in whose books such sum is found credited. The onus, it's not burden. Shailendra-ji is there from Hyderabad the other day, my fellow co-speaker, when she made out a very fine distinction which is there. Otherwise, we often tend to use onus and burden interchangeably. Burden is fixed, whereas onus is oscillating, onus is vacillating, onus is like the pendulum of a watch. I always say that the onus is like playing a game of ping pong, where a person in whose court the ball is, he is required to hit it. When he hits it, it goes into the court of the opponent, then this will be for the opponent to hit it back. And that is how the onus operates. So the moment there is sum found credited, then the initial onus to explain the nature and source is on the person in whose books that credit appears. So first of all, the question now which comes to our mind as to whether any kind of credit is amenable to be scrutinized on the touchstone of section 68, or whether the credit now which has already been taken into account by me as income to my profit and loss account, now whether it is still open for the assessing officer to trash the nature of that credit. I am conscious that there are certain decisions which have come from the tribunal, but those who have heard me on earlier occasions, I mean, would vouch that I do not speak on the borrowed principles of law. I mean, those first principles of law. Now, I mean, we should, because after all, we all are chartered accountants, and therefore, I mean, we are a class apart. And therefore, we should not be swayed by what, I mean, there are judicial decisions. I'm not saying if there are judicial decisions, of course, as a practicing counsel, as a practicing chartered accountant, that we must capitalize, of course, when we have to argue the case of our client. But then, since I am speaking class, which is a class apart, and therefore I will be failing in my duty if I do not inject an element of the intellectualism in the discussion. So any sum found credited in the books of account, I mean, cannot be constituted in a limited or in a restricted manner. And therefore, all those now who say or converse or argue that if there is some sale or some profit which I have already credited to my profit and loss account and which I have already offered as income and on which I am paying tax, now should be outside the can and net of assessing officer's examination under section 68, then I am constant to say that it is not the correct understanding of law. Because going by the rule of literal constructions and even going by the purport and object with which such deeming fictions have been created. Now to give this much of restricted meaning to this phrase of income or the sum found credited, I will not be doing justice. And therefore, it will be open for an assessing officer to examine the correct and the true nature and source of that credit, even if you may have offered it as your income. Because ultimately, to determine its correct and true nature, I mean, is also the job of an assessing officer. Now, the camouflage, the shape, or the manner in which that credit has been declared by you may not represent its true character. And therefore, now, do I want to say that the assessing officer should be ousted from looking and determining the true nature of the income by peeping through and by trashing through that camouflage? Now, whether is it not permissible to him? No, I would say sorry if this kind of an interpretation is taken by anybody. Therefore, we should be clear that the moment there is any credit of any nature in whatever manner offered by us, it is open, according to me, on the first principles of law for the assessing officer to be convinced as to its correct and true nature and source of his income. The next thing, explanation as to the nature and source in the opinion of the assessing officer is not satisfactory. And then therefore, I mean, what is the meaning of the word satisfactory? Because somebody can say that the kind of mindset our physical assessing officers used to have. Now we have got the invisible assessing officer, we will have, and we will have the battery of invisible assessing officer operating from the different units. Now what would happen, I do not know. I mean, the SSCs used to be fed up with one physical assessing officer. Now there will be the battery of assessing officers in different units, and that too guided by the higher ups. And I feel pity. Anyway, but then that is the system which in the democratic polity, I mean, we have adopted through the parliament, and therefore we do not have any option but to bow down. And it has been done in the name of bringing efficiency, accountability, and transparency. Let us keep our fingers crossed that to what extent, I mean, these elements have come to be obtained and achieved by the administration. Anyway, I mean, that is beside the point. So I was on this point that when the legislature says, Dr. Saab, kindly listen, Dr. Saab, my chairman, when the legislature says that the assessing officer has to be satisfied, now somebody can say that the kind of assessing officers we have seen and known would never be satisfied, irrespective of the quality and the amount. But then I am not on the subjective approach of any assessing officer. I am on this point as to what is the position of law, and when the legislature uses such kind of expressions, as to what does it mean? It means that authority in which that discretion to exercise or being satisfied is vested, now will use that discretion before he arrives at to the satisfaction or to the dissatisfaction he will have to use justice, equity, and good conscience. And these are the principles. So while being satisfied or while being dissatisfied, that officer, that assessing officer, that quasi-judicial authority, that public officer, because it is a common law, has to be satisfied, meaning thereby that it is not an arbitrary satisfaction or dissatisfaction. He has to be judicious, he has to be conscientious, he has to be fair, he has to be reasonable, he has to be objective. Only then he can be said that his satisfaction was in accordance with law or his dissatisfaction was in accordance with law. Therefore, these principles, now which I have just laid before this August gathering, I mean, they are not invention of mine. They are the invention of the time-tested judicial enunciation, pronunciation, and the expounding of law by the courts, the highest court, the constitutional court. So, when the legislature, wherever the legislature says that the assessing officer has to be satisfied, that means he has to be satisfied by using his satisfaction or dissatisfaction on the touchstone of all these principles which I have just culled out. But then, even if he was not satisfied, that is not the end of the road. That is not the end of the matter. Because his dissatisfaction is subject to judicial review before the higher appellate forum. Or in case you are so aggrieved against his dissatisfaction that you want to invoke the writ jurisdiction of the High Court, then before the writ court. So, satisfaction, he has to be satisfied on these principles. In case he is not, then the next best authority, which is either the appellate authority or the writ court, then will have to be impressed upon. My lords, sir, your honor, your good self would kindly see that this officer below, against whose order, I mean, you have been approached, was not fair, was not judicious, was not conscientious, was not objective, was not reasonable. Though the legislature uses the expressions may, like in section 68, 69, 69A, B, C. I mean, the legislature has used the expressions may, but then may doesn't mean कि उसके मन की मर्जी है. No. वो मन मर्जी का स्वामी हो सकता है, लेकिन अपने इस कार्य क्षेत्र में नहीं, बिकॉज ये तो अर्धशासकीय, कैसी जुडिशियल न्यायिक व्यवस्था का ये अंग है. May means that all these principles will have to be observed. Addition, in which year? Section 68 says, in which there is a credit. But then if the genesis that it has come from a preceding year, it may have been entered in a books of account in this year, but then that amount, if traced back, now comes in the preceding year, then which is the year in the additions can be made if the explanation as to the nature and source is not found. Though section 68 says the year of credit, but then there are courts decision which say 140 ITR, I remember the Delhi High Court, 140 ITR at page 880, it says then the year in which that amount has seen the light of the sun for the first time, that will be the year in which that credit is liable to be added. Share capital, there is a proviso, and that proviso, I forgot, there is a fiction, deeming provision, that the explanation furnished as to the nature and source of the share capital or the share premium shall not be deemed to be duly explained unless that deeming provision has been expressed in negative manner, unless you furnish the evidence from the person a step further. That is what a proviso to section 68 says. Now, one aspect I want to highlight, it is not written anywhere and you will not find much jurisprudence on it. And that is that whether the extent of onus in the matter of credit depends upon the nature of credit. If I have received a gift, the extent of onus is of a different genre, is of a different magnitude. If I received the capital, then the extent of onus is different. If I have received the trade credit, the onus is different. If I have received the trade credit which I have repaid it, then the extent of onus, I mean would be on different pedestal. Though the law doesn't make any distinction. Or if I'm permitted to say, the extent of onus may not be different, but then the way it is discharged is bound to be viewed with different parameters by the courts or by the authority. Law of pleading. That day I spoke on the law of pleading before the Telangana and Andhra Pradesh Tax Bar Association. Because when there is a credit in the books of account of a person, and therefore the question comes whether that credit is genuine or not. Doctor, the question is whether that credit is genuine or not. Everything percolates down to this question. And therefore the courts have said that whether the credit is genuine or not is a question of fact, it is not a question of law. And that is why when my chartered accountants friends rush to the wall, iske upar koi case law ho to batlao, case law ho to batlao, I always say that instead of concentrating your energy on the case law, now why don't you channelize your energy for collecting the evidences which proves the genuineness of the credit? And therefore Shailendra Sharma ji is here from Hyderabad. He would remember. Now, one thing which was asked from me was about the representational skill in this changed system of the facelessness. I said, though the form may have changed, but then those time-tested principle of representations, they still remain the same and are relevant. And therefore, since it is a question of fact, the facts have to be established with evidence. Therefore, the evidences must be brought on record in your representation, whether before the assessing officer or before the appellate authority. But then it must be brought before the assessing officer. You having not produced those evidences before the assessing officer, then you incur a disability in the form of admission of the additional evidences before the appellate authority. So therefore, these facts must be brought before the court of original jurisdiction. Demonetization cases, cash deposited out of your cash book, out of your sales, assessing officer would not accept. They did not accept. They did not accept across the board throughout the country. Hundreds and thousands of cases now have been drawn into litigation. That is a different matter. That the persons like me and my chairman who are neck deep into litigation, so they are bound to thrive and be prosperous. Obviously, we owe a share of our prosperity, to the amount of litigations which is unleashed by the tax department. And sometimes on a narrow compass, we welcome it. On a narrow compass, in the lighter note, I am saying we welcome it. So, cash deposited in the books of account, or cash deposited in the bank account. Your books of accounts have been accepted. Your stock tallies have been accepted. Your purchases have been accepted. Purchases have been paid through the banking channel. There is not even an iota or whisper of any adverse observations as to your purchases. But then the assessing officer would say that the last year, in these very months, this was never the cash balance held by you. How can you be seen to be holding this much of cash here? Issue is somewhere, but then shooting is somewhere else. Cash deposited during the demonetization, in most of the cases, the department has not taken its case to the logical end, rather has not begun from the logical end, and therefore there was no question of the department reaching to the logical end. and therefore from illogical beginning to the illogical end, and what would happen, the logical conclusion in the form of the deletions of those additions. You'll have to bear for some more pain. You'll have to endure some more pain till either the first appellate authority hears or ultimately the income tax appellate tribunal. Now, one more question. Now, if there was a credit in the books of account, the assessing officer, or there was not books of account maintained by you, but then the assessing officer invokes section 68. Now, can on that basis alone, that the assessing officer has invoked wrong section, because the maintenance of books of account is a condition precedent for invoking section 68. Now, can that be fatal in itself, by itself? The judicial opinion is divided. Allahabad High Court is very categorical in favor of the taxpayer. Sarika Jain, 407 ITR 254. There are conflicting decisions of the tribunal. But then on the first principles of law. Now, if an authority has invoked the wrong section, the section 292 capital B is there. Now that can be corrected by the higher appellate authority. On first principle, but then if I have to argue, obviously I will take assistance of all those, judicial decisions which say that it was not permissible for the appellate authority to shunt between the different sections, which was not even invoked by the assessing officer. Section 69. Section 69, the initial burden to show that the investment has been made is on the shoulders of the assessing officer. But once that burden is discharged, if the assessee is found to have made investment, then the burden shifts on the shoulders of the assessee. Then he will have to explain as to the nature and source of that investment. In case he is not able to explain, or his explanation does not come to the satisfaction of the assessing officer, then the year in which that investment is found to have been made now will be the year in which the addition is liable to be made. That is what the important impact of section 69 of the Income Tax Act. And section 69A is also on, or for that matter in 69B is also on identical footing, because section 69 say about the money, bullion, jewelry, valuable article of thing. 69B says when the investment though recorded in the books of account but partially recorded in the books of account. But then there is a deeming provision as to the year of chargeability. And in case you want to displace that deeming fiction or presumption, then the burden is on you. Or for that matter, if the department wants to displace, the burden is on the department. Otherwise, in the absence of such kind of the burden being discharged by either of the parties, then the year in which that investment has come to be made now will be the year in which that addition is liable to be made. I remember locker was opened, substantial amount of jewelry was found. Even the cash was found. Therefore, the question arose that the year in which the search took place and this locker was opened should be the year of taxability of this undisclosed income or income from undisclosed source. But then the assessee could demonstrate by authentic evidence like that of the bank record that this locker was opened after 4 years. And therefore, insofar as the jewelry is concerned, the valuation of the jewelry will have to be made as per the rates which are prevalent the year in which the locker was last operated, because that will be the year in which it can be said that the jewelries have surfaced. And even that cash now which has been found today because of the opening of locker, since locker was last operated 4 years back, and therefore that will be the year in which it was last operated, it will be the year in which that cash will be taxed by the department. So to this extent, I just wanted to highlight. Section 69C. Now 69AB is with respect to the expenditure or with respect to the investment. 69C is in respect of an expenditure. It's not bogus expenditure. It's expenditure though was incurred as a fact, but then the source of that expenditure was not explained. I have found even the high courts mingling these two terminologies very loosely. Bogus expenditure is an expenditure which has not been incurred, but then is shown to have been incurred. Now that will be disallowed separately, either under section 37 or under section 29. But now which is found to have been incurred as a matter of fact, but then its source from where that expenditure has been made, now is not explained. There's no evidence for it. And therefore, this is section 69C. Again, if SSE is found to have incurred an expenditure, so initial burden is on the assessing officer that the SSE should be found to have incurred expenditure. And therefore, whenever the assessing officer estimates just in the air that the SSE's household expenses must be this much, first of all, the assessing officer will have to prove that this much was the expenditure. There must be some basis based on cogent material. Only then the burden will shift on the SSE. So if an expenditure is found to have been incurred by an SSE, SSE does not come forward to offer his explanations about the nature and source, or explanation offered by him is not to the satisfaction of the assessing officer, then such expenditure will be deemed to have been made out of the income from undisclosed source. That is what section 69C says. And then there is a proviso, which is very important. And really, sometimes, I feel so much satisfaction and solace when I find myself responsible for the enactment of certain sections. And this is one of them, that proviso to section 69C. That gift under section 56(2)(5) initial provision. Dr. Girish Ahuja would always say, Rakesh, you are responsible for the creation of this section. Yes. I had an occasion to argue the case of once upon a time the most powerful chief minister, the then chief minister of the biggest state of the country. Yes. We proved that the gifts of our personal traits and therefore were capital receipts. There was no provision on the lines of section 56(2)(5) at that point of time. Then the section came. So this proviso, which was added by Finance Act 1998 with effect from 1/4/99, it says that if an addition has been made under section 69C, then that expenditure will not be allowed to you against any head of income. There is an explicit denial, because what used to happen if survey took place? I do remember in that case, the survey took place, lots of wages sheets which were paid outside the books were found. Additions were made under section 69C that you have incurred this expenditure, the source of which has not been explained by you. I said you make additions, but then kindly give me the deductions against my business income, because the contemporary evidences itself shows that these were the business expenditure. Therefore, the department found that its discovery was set at naught by this argument, and later on the amendment was made. But then kindly do mind it that this kind of a provision is there in respect of an expenditure. It is not there in respect of an investment. Suppose if some investment has been found or is found to have been made outside the books of account, and addition is made either under section 69 or 69B, then that expenditure or that investment now will partake the character of total investment, and later on when that asset is sold for a considerations larger than that aggregate costs or investment, then for the purpose of computing the real capital gain, the real cost 69C and 69 when it comes to the allowability of deduction. 69D is hollow section. Hollow in the sense because I have not department or anybody to have followed this section much, except barring in my practical life of 35 years, operating in different capacities. I myself have seen only a couple of cases. There may be cases in an unorganized sector when the amounts are borrowed or repaid on hundi, otherwise through the banking channel. Section 69D says that if an amount has been borrowed or repaid on hundi, otherwise than through the banking channel, then the acceptance of that amount now will constitute as income, will be deemed to be income. Or even if you may have borrowed it through the banking channel on hundi, but then if you happen to repay it, otherwise then through the banking channel, then even that repayment will also be treated as your income. Under section 269 SS or section 269T, there is a penalty. But here, receipt or payment otherwise then through the banking channel would lead to the making of addition under section 69D. So that has to be taken care of. Now I'll come to section 115 BBE. Now this is a section which really, I mean, bites more than, I mean, it can chew. 60%, 25% of 60% as a surcharge, 4% as the secondary and higher education cess. So effective tax rate comes to 78%. Probably we have completed the full circle. Doctor, if you remember, but then I do remember when I was doing graduation in the year 1978 to 1980, I started reading the Income Tax Act for the first time. At that time, the tax rate used to be somewhere 65%. Now, I, as a student of income tax, found this tax rate very high. I used to ask, who would earn 100 rupees to pay 65% to the government? My seniors told me that don't get baffled at 65%. Not very long ago, I mean, the tax rate used to be as high as 97%. Then we brought it down to 30%. 30% is still there in many cases. But then this 115 BBE now makes it 78%. And that is how, and that is why I said probably we have completed the full circle. Dr. very rightly said in his opening remarks that any taxation system now which is so atrocious, like that of 115 BBE, or which does not seek to tax the real income, which seeks to tax some unreal income, like income burdened with the disalliance like 43B or 40AIA. I mean, unreal income. Unreal. I tell you, Doctor, in one of the cases which I had an occasion to argue with the Delhi High Court, it was a case of subcontractor. He did not, it was a case of a contractor. His income was 17 lakhs. He was to deduct 1% out of the payments which he made to subcontractors. And that payment was about 19 crores, though he deducted it, but then he delayed by 1 day. He paid it after the due date of filing of return by 1 day. And you know, overnight he became millionaire. Overnight he became millionaire in the sense that his 17 lakhs income became, you can very well under 19 crore 17 lakhs. I mean, that is what Dr. highlighted and pointed out. Unreal income. What kind of a taxation system we are in? 115 BBE. Now, this is the section which has said for the first time that these sections are without any, these sections are orphan. There is no parent of these sections. Otherwise, section 14 says that these 5 heads of income are in the nature of the parent head, under which every addition has to be made. But then these additions, section 68, 69 ABC, I mean section 115 BBE says, since those parent heads are for the source incomes. Now, since these are the incomes from undisclosed source, therefore they are without umbrella, they are without cover, they are without parents, they are orphan. Doctor, am I clear? Now, how, but then 115 said we will tax them at a flat rate. Earlier it used to be 30%, but now it is now 78. Effective tax rate is 78%. I remember demonetization was announced on 8th of November 2016 to come into effect from the midnight. Lots of telephones came to me and to my partner, Dr. Raj Agrawal. Our income, under that income from other sources, and pay tax 30%. Now, will there be any penalty? Section 270(11)(c) was sent by that time into the dustbin of history by the legislature. Section 270 capital A was there, and that says that if there is a difference between the returned income and the assessed income, only then there is a penalty. Now, if I myself offer some income and it comes to be assessed as such, then obviously there will never be an occasion for the difference between the assessed income and returned income. Therefore, there was no penalty. We wrote an article, I remember, on 10th itself we wrote an article. But then, since that article went beyond the brief of the government, therefore we thought twice before we could allow our article to be published. But then on 13th we mustered courage and then gave it to the Economic Times. Economic Times also did not publish it as it is. But then the substratum of that, or the pith and substance, or the substance of that article was flashed by Economic Times. It was 13th of November. And then on 15th of December, now we have got Taxation Laws Second Amendment Act 2016. And that told us that from 1/4/2017, meaning thereby that any such income to be assessed under these sections, even if have come into existence prior to 15th of December 2016, but then that income will suffer the tax rate of 78%. And that is how, when the section now has come up in challenge before the Rajasthan High Court, and Dr. Saab would be aware, Rajasthan High Court has issued the notice to the union, but then thereafter Corona came. I'm not aware as to the development thereafter. But then this much of penalty, then 271 AAC, 6% penalty, 10% of 60%, there is penalty. 271 AAC. This, I mean, this much of less percentage of penalty is somewhat astonishing to me. Because the taxations have always spoken of 100% or 200% or 300%. In that light, 6% looks to be quite moderate. But then they have already taken 78%. I mean, this much of tax rate of 78% is confiscatory. It confiscates the entire amount. And in case of search, Dr. Saab, kindly imagine, in case of search, minimum penalty 30%, 271 AAB, the maximum 60%. Meaning thereby 78 plus 60%, 138%. I mean, this is the height. Now, who would come forward to declare? Government though may say we do not want somebody to come forward. If we have got the guts, we'll take it. But then, I mean, this kind of a matching approach on the part of the government coming to the level of an ordinary citizen, I mean, it is something, I mean, which doesn't somehow, I mean, because ethical system in any society is not built overnight. It is the product of hundreds and therefore, if I'm not saying that you have to render the kids glow, but then some amount of I leave it at that stage. That is the larger issue. Yes. Now, undisclosed income and income from undisclosed source. There is a difference. Undisclosed income may not be an income from undisclosed source. That has to be borne in, because if it is an income from undisclosed source, then the stepped up higher tax rate is there under section 115 BBE. But then if undisclosed income is not from undisclosed source, then 115 BB is not there. Somebody can say, explain it with illustrations. I will. Survey takes place. Evidences are found that this businessman has paid bonus to his employees outside the books of account. So the bonus paid by the employer will be income from undisclosed source for him, will attract 115 BB tax rate, but then the bonus received by the employees is not, it may be undisclosed income, because those employees also must not have disclosed it. उनको ऊपर ऊपर मिल गया ये bonus, वो क्यों दिखलाएंगे? It may be undisclosed income, but then it is not income from undisclosed source, and therefore it will be assessed under the head salary for them. And when it will be assessed under that salary, then obviously it will attract the normal tax rate which is applicable to his income. So it is not necessary that if at one end it is income from undisclosed source, then on the other hand it will invariably be income from undisclosed. No, his law is not like this. Now, if a tenant has paid arrears of rent to his landlord outside the books, so for the tenant, if this payment is discovered by the tax department, then it is an income from undisclosed source, because the source is not explained. But then in the hands of the landlord, it is income which is assessable under section 25 or 25A of the Income Tax Act, is under the head income of house property.
Apologies, sir.
Yes. I have got a property which is a capital asset for me. In the books, I sold it for 2 crores. Survey or search takes place, or even because of some investigations unleashed by the department, it is found that it was actually sold for 3.5 crores. So the person who has paid that on money, 1 crore and 50 lakhs of rupees, for him, it is an income from undisclosed source. But then for me, now this amount which I have received, that is the on money, now is in connection with the transfer of a capital asset. It may be undisclosed income, but then this is not an income from undisclosed source. I am running a business. Survey takes place. Evidences of the sales having been made outside the books of accounts are found. I mean, those who have paid to me on account of the purchases, which is a sales at my end, for them it may be income from undisclosed source. But then for me, either during the course of existing business or as a separate business for that matter, it is an income which is liable to be assessed under the head income from business. Interest income. So I'm on this point. I will be finishing very quickly, and then I will take upon the questions, because I can keep on speaking for hours together. But then that is not the objective. There must be questions, and I would be, and if my chairman directs me, of course, I am subject to his direction, superintendence, and control. Therefore, the question comes, the thing which I tried to raise, Shailendra ji, as to under and how the surrender is to be made during the course of survey or search. The one thing which has to be borne in mind as a bottom line is this, that if you surrender income or if you surrender asset, if you surrender towards an asset, then you take it for most of the times that surrender would be liable to be assessed as income under the head other sources, or sorry, from undisclosed sources. But then if you surrender an income, then obviously the income has to be under a particular head. And depending upon the facts, if you can telescope that asset which is found from such income which you offer, then that income, since falling under a particular head of income, and is bound to suffer the tax at the normal rate. Therefore, if I surrender, depending upon the facts, I am not saying you surrender just out of the blue. No. If the facts are like this, if there are, say, creditors which are languishing and lying for years together, now which you consider is no longer payable by you, and then you offer it under section 41 subsection 1, then obviously such a remitted creditor are liable to be, or the liability in respect of such credits which have ceased to exist, liable to be added under section 41(1), which is the part of section 28 to 44 DB, that is under the head business. If there is a surrender in respect of the higher gross profit or the net profit, obviously, then it is liable to be assessed as business income. If there were some bad debts, now which you happen to recover, and that recovery is surrendered, then obviously, that recovery of the bad debt is liable to be taxed under section 41 subsection 5. If some expenses are found to be inflated, then obviously the expenses are suppressing your business profits. Now your business profits would swell, would be larger. And the business profits then will have to be taxed, as per the normal provisions of law, not 115 BB. If there are suppressed sales, if suppressed sales are there, then income in respect of the suppressed sales, will suffer the tax under that business. Shortage of stock found. The stock is found short. The inference then will be that it has been sold outside the books. And if the inference is that it has been sold outside the books, then obviously its income is liable to be assessed under that business. If there is a scrap sale. So the bottom line is, what can I tell? Such well-informed audience of mine, that there is a difference. In the case of business, now surrender towards the stock is found more. Then the question comes now whether that surrender which is made towards that undisclosed investment into the stocks will be treated as business income or not. It has been very contentious issues. But recently I have seen the spate of decisions from your Jodhpur bench of the tribunal, and then which has taken assistance to the Rajasthan High Court, which says that depending upon as to how you correlate that excessive stock found with the business and the absence of discovery of any other stock which has got nothing to do with your business, now would lead to this inference, as the courts have said in those decisions, that stock was your business stocks, and therefore would invite the tax rate under the head income from business, not under the head income from other. So 1.5 hours has gone, half an hour is there, and now today I can say this is my 102nd webinar during this COVID time. I started from 10th of April. Even if I wanted that I will not speak, but then my friends scattered throughout the country, would not let me. But then I can say that today is my last webinar, this post-COVID, because of the tax audits, either no branch has come forward to ask me to speak anymore. So that will give to me some breathing space. And I would also think to join the virtual court hearings, though I have started it, but then I will join in many more virtual court hearings. So friends, I will give, if my chairman permits, I'll take questions. Thank you from the core of my heart. Now half an hour is there. Whatever the questions are there, I'll take it. Thank you from the core of my heart. Yes, Chairman sir. चेयरमैन साहब, चैट में तो 49 लोग हैं. Baldi Saab, I mean, where have all gone? I have finished my deliberations. I am invoking my chairman to kindly guide me.
Hello, am I audible, sir?
Yes, yes, very much, very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. The dice is now open for the questions. And just, there are some questions, I was just going through it. So there's one person who sent a question saying that kindly give example of undisclosed income.
Undisclosed income, Kamal Juneja ji from Dehradun, my friend, I am looking at his face, such a charming face I am seeing. So Kamal sir, the example of undisclosed income, the income which is not disclosed is undisclosed income. It may be on account of the suppressed salary, it may be on account of the suppressed house property income, it may be on account of suppressed business income, capital gain, other sources. I mean that disclosed to the department on which the tax has not been paid is undisclosed income. And for that matter, even the income which is from undisclosed source is also an undisclosed income.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other questions?
No, there are no questions. It's very good. I finished it within 1.5 hours because my experience in the past has been that if I speak for 2 hours, then 1 more hour, then I am engaged with questions and answers. But then probably I spoke with this much amount of clarity that there are no questions led with the audience. That much, I mean, that is the natural inference which I can draw.
Yes,
I mean, we lawyers, I mean, tend to draw inferences like this.
agreed to your point, sir. So now we'll proceed on to the next part of it. So I request our session chairman, Dr. Nirmal Kunawat ji, to please come forward for his closing remarks. So.
Oh, that's nice. We'll finish it early.
Thank you. Thank you, Meenakshi. We are thankful to Dr. Rakesh Gupta for his very elaborate and lucid explanation of the subject, deeming provisions of under income tax. And I'm hopeful we all professional brothers have been benefited a lot. It is a very nice area of practice, I can say, though it is direct tax itself is a such. But what Rakesh Gupta ji has lightly said, कि अगर complications नहीं होंगे तो फिर कैसे चलेगा? Some complications have to be there. और हम चाहें या न चाहें, complications will remain क्योंकि revenue को और हमेशा revenue collection के लिए complications रहेंगे ही रहेंगे. Yes, कहीं न कहीं tax administration higher tax rate, higher penalties लगाकर वो चाहते हैं कि voluntarily compliance हो, but जब तक awareness और ये सब चीजें नहीं होगी, it will be very difficult, and litigations will definitely increase on account of deeming provisions.
Dr. S.C. Jain has not come.
Pardon?
Dr. S.C. Jain has not come, I think.
S.C. Jain, we have
but
not
then,
seen him.
but then tomorrow he will say, Rakesh ji, I could not attend. Kindly send the recording. Now you take care of him. I will not be sending to him, at least for this webinar.
Yes, sir. So we are thankful, and I hand over to the MOC for further deliberations. Meenakshi, please.
Thank you so much, sir. So we are here at the end of the session. It has been a wonderful week, and we'll have one more session tomorrow from 5 to 7. So before I end the session, I would like to thank the learned speaker, Dr. Rakesh Gupta. It was indeed a wonderful experience. And of course, the kind of involvement of this audience we can see, because this session has been the session with highest number of participants. Till now, we've been having sessions throughout the week from Monday. So itself, the interest of all the members is very much apparent. Thank you so much, sir, for taking out your valuable time and for being a part of this session. Thank you so much to our session chairman, Nirmal Kunawat ji. Thank you for being a part of this session. It's always, as I said, it's always wonderful to hear you, but we are missing the live sessions where we could get to hear you live. So hopefully pretty soon. Thank you, sir, for being a part of the session, Nirmal sir. Thank you so much, Manish Bam. I think he's CA Manish Bamji for the welcome speech. Thank you so much, the branch chairman, Chandra Prakash Baldi sir, who's working really hard. He's working really hard for the construction and the renovation of the building, at the same time maintaining so many events together. And this has been a really successful week, because throughout the week we have been having sessions from Monday till tomorrow. We'll be having one more session tomorrow from 5 to 7. And thank you so much to the vice chairman of the branch, Ashish Oswalji. I think he's present here. Thank you so much for your presence. Thank you to all the members for making this a grand success. We were hoping that this week becomes a successful week, but we were not expecting such an overwhelming participation. So it has been an amazing week. Tomorrow again, we'll be having a session from 5 to 7. The details will be floated soon. Please remember that you need to fill up the Google form to avail your CP credit. So, and plus the most important thing is, when you're present in the session, please do mention your full name to make sure that the CP attendance is marked. Thank you everybody for your presence. Thank you, sir. This is me, CA Meenakshi Birwani, the branch secretary. Thanking you all. Thank you.